Today it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Afaf Meleis, who's being honored in the Marin County Women's Hall of Fame in 2019 for her pioneering work worldwide in women's health and nursing. And Afaf, it's just great to be here in your home today. Thank you so much. So let's begin with your family in Egypt, what it was like, what your family was like, your parents, and so on.
Well, first of all, I'm absolutely delighted you are my interviewer, Joan. It's wonderful to reflect back on where I grew up. I was born and raised in Alexandria, Egypt, and when I think of my upbringing, I think of the beautiful villa where I grew up, where my parents rented the top floor of it, but it was owned by French people, which is really important because that Alexandria was very, very cosmopolitan. And they used it as a summer vacation place. And so they were not there, and we stayed at the top floor, and it had a beautiful garden, and I think of the jacaranda tree and plumeria and the roses and the garden where I studied. My family was, I'd say, lower middle class family, and the area where they chose to live was upper middle class, so there was really juxtaposition of this. And my parents had just finished junior high school, so their education was very limited, but also our household was multi-generational. So I had a grandmother who was a farmer and came from a really small village, and she...
Near Alexandria?
Not actually near Alexandria, far. So my mother sort of moved her parents at different stages as she was studying nursing until she brought them to Alexandria. And so I had lots of inspiring stories growing up that affected me. So my grandmother, who was very much a storyteller, who hardly knew, she never went to school, but she was wise in terms of her life experiences and very nurturing and very caring. She would describe how she had her babies in the field and just by herself, and how many babies she has lost because of lack of health care in the villages way away. But she was so adamant about education that was very important that her grandchildren become really educated.
So what other people influenced you in your early life? Did you have any early mentors?
Well, I'd say my parents were really important in that. So my father, who was...
Wasn't he a sea captain?
Well, later on in life, but it started with lighthouses. He was a keeper of lighthouses. Right. Yeah. And he traveled a lot, and he would spend months in the lighthouse as just a really beginning lighthouse keeper. And so he inspired me by his organization and orderliness. And in fact, that's probably where I got the bug for traveling, because he was always, I think of him growing up as always preparing his huge big suitcases, trunk, it's called trunk, and how he would organize it, and then how he would communicate with us through the radio to show his love and to continue to be part of the family. So he inspired me with his zest for life, with his love for life, with his interest in people from different cultures. My mother inspired me because of her love in nursing. She became a nurse. She went to a school that is Florence Nightingale School. That's a hospital school, so it's just a high school really, but it was...
So after junior high, she got training in a hospital as a nurse.
A hospital school, hospital school.
And so she was like 16 or 18 when she did that?
She was about that. They probably went enter because she did. Diploma schools of nursing were housed in hospitals, and they were instead of going into high school. But I have to tell you more about who else inspired me before I tell you more about my mother.
Please do.
So I definitely, in my upbringing, they were very important. I have to say that I continue to be inspired by my husband, who without him I wouldn't be where I am right now. and teachers in schools inspired me. Now, my mother's story is phenomenal because my mother went from being barefoot in villages to finishing up her PhD.
Yeah.
And I think I really credit my grandparents for inspiring her with education. So she finished first that diploma school. She became a nurse midwife, and then she became an administrator and was a successful leader in nursing in Alexandria. So World Health Organization came to Egypt and wanted to establish a baccalaureate program in nursing and wanted to find somebody to get the first bachelor degree.
Isn't that? And your mom was it?
And so they sent her to Syracuse University to be the first nurse in the Middle East to get her bachelor degree, and then she came back to Egypt and decided that really nurses need voice and they need better education. So she went and got a master's degree in public health.
Where was that?
At the University of Alexandria. Opened the university for other nurses to be able to enter the School of Public Health to get a master's.
Yeah.
And then she opened Cairo University for a PhD. So she got her PhD in Cairo.
I have met her. She's just amazing. So tell us a little bit about your personal journey. We've heard what nursing education was like in Egypt when you were growing up, and that they didn't have a bachelor's degree at that point. How did you get to UCLA? How did that whole thing work? And then once you got there, how did you choose to stay?
Very interesting story. So going back to my mother, she really did not want me to go into nursing. She felt that nursing was undervalued, it's undercompensated, and that it's a struggle, and it was a struggle for her. But her struggle inspired me to wanting to be part of that struggle and to be challenged and to make some changes. The World Health Organization were trying to improve nursing in the world, and they chose Egypt and India and Mexico to develop baccalaureate programs. So coincidentally, most of the palaces in Egypt were confiscated. And the government decided if WHO, World Health Organization, is going to open the first baccalaureate program in the Middle East, in Europe, and in Africa, then they're going to give the school a palace. So here is the WHO establishing the school. Professors came from all over the world, a really wonderful environment to study, and the promise that those who excel in the school will be offered to compete for scholarships to continue their education. So first I was inspired by my mother that this is going to make a difference in the quality of care in the world. Second, there was just the government was really behind it and committed to do something. Thirdly, I thought this is a wonderful career. I'm going to be.
So did you get your BA in Egypt?
I got my Bachelor of Science in Nursing
Yes.
in the University of Alexandria.
And then how did you get to UCLA?
So then I competed for a fellowship, a scholarship. I wouldn't have been able to come to the United States financially. So I competed for a scholarship from Rockefeller Foundation. Bless their heart, decided, like WHO, they decided that to improve healthcare in the developing countries, they should give opportunity for nurses to get higher education. So I competed for a scholarship and I got a Rockefeller Foundation scholarship. I did not choose UCLA. I only applied, got the scholarship. They matched me with the university, so I didn't know actually where to apply. And that's what happened to many women in developing countries. It's very hard to decide.
Had you traveled outside of Egypt before you came to California?
I had traveled outside of Egypt to go to Syria because I was in the hockey team, in the field hockey team, and we competed. And because it was the very first a hockey team in Egypt, and it was at the University of Alexandria. All of a sudden, we became the national team.
There you go.
And so we traveled to Syria to compete. But I had never been. But because my mother had come to the United States, so that really inspired me that I want to study in there.
So how was the transition for you from Egypt to wild California?
Hollywood. I thought I was going to Hollywood and I'm going to be meeting lots of the
Movie
famous
stars.
movie stars there, which I did not, unfortunately. But Westwood was wonderful. Well, it was tough. I left my fiancé. I was engaged at the time. I left my parents for the first time to 10,000 miles away, and in a completely different culture. And you know, under pressure to make sure I excel. Otherwise, Rockefeller Foundation would pull. But I have to say that UCLA was a very hospitable place for me. Rockefeller Foundation did it right. They brought us, a group of us from different countries. And so there was a cohort for us.
So there was were you in an international housing situation?
Not the housing, because we spread around. But we were an international group, peers, and we supported each other. We were from Mexico, Brazil, Switzerland, India, Japan, Korea, Japan. And we became very, very close group of friends. And I was just in Japan recently, and I saw one of my
old cohorts.
Old cohort, and they all, I have to say, all became leaders in their own country and presidents.
And they all went back to their own countries.
All of them, except probably me.
Okay, so you stayed. Why did you stay?
I had no intention to stay in the United States.
That.
I came to get my master's, and then to get my PhD, and to go back. The political situation, and this is what happened to us immigrants. It's not really one thing or other. So I didn't come as an immigrant. I came as an international student, and to prepare myself and get the best from the United States and take it back and come back and forth. But the political situation in Egypt was not great, and it was becoming less democratic, and it went from monarchy to military rule. And we didn't think, my husband and I credit my husband actually for staying here. I had no intention of wanting to stay here. But he actually felt that we're not going to be able to do what we want to do, and we're not going to impact the healthcare system and engineering as much as we want to because of the political situation.
But I just want to interject here. It's not like you abandoned Egypt, because as will unfold in this interview, you've had impact in women's health all over the world, including Egypt.
And nursing education.
And probably have had more of an impact than if you'd been able to go back, because it's been not only Egypt, but other developing countries and developed countries. So a lot of your, so you are an RN, you are a nurse, but you're not the person who sits there and takes my blood pressure.
But I could.
You could, but your experience and your passion has been academia and teaching others and research and inspiring others. So a lot of your professional work has been centered on amplifying the voices of women and members of vulnerable populations. So how did that emerge for you, and how have you accomplished that, and what led you to that?
Well, first of all, you should know that 90% of nurses are women. And
today or then?
Well, probably then it was maybe more like 100%. Now it's 90% all over the world. And 70% of the healthcare system is carried by women and by nurses and by caregivers. So these are very important statistics to remember. And this is how I tie my interest and my support of my profession with my passion about women's health. So how did my passion, well, we know where my passion about nursing came from. It started from my mother, but it's also, it really started from knowing that nursing makes a difference, and nursing is a human science and takes care of people, not of diseases, takes care of people within a family, within a community. Now, I sat in my mother's midwifery clinic in Alexandria, and I listened to women's stories there and girls' stories.
How old were you?
Starting from being 6 to until I went into nursing. I was 15 when I went into nursing. And she didn't have the clinic for that long of time because she came to the United States and she had to open the clinic. But that was really important. And she would share with me the stories about those women and what happened to them and what happened in the family and healthcare that's not really oriented to listening to their needs and listening to their voices. So that was beginning. Then I listened to nurses' stories all over the world, and it's the devaluation, the lack of compensation, the question of you are just a nurse, knowing that nursing is the most important aspect and it's the heart and soul of healthcare. So these then led me to say, I want to hear women's stories. And so I listened to women's stories, I listened to nurses' stories, and then I listened to women's stories in Mexico, in Brazil, in this is where my research was done, in Colombia, in Egypt, in Kuwait, in Finland, in Sweden, and the stories are the same, whether they are women, nurses, or caregivers. There is a devaluation, there is less compensation, there is a marginalization. The voice is not heard.
Do you think it's because it's female, or do you think it's because it's nursing?
It's because, so I consider myself the minority of minorities. I am a nurse, I am a woman, I have an accent, I am an immigrant, I am a social scientist rather than biological scientist. So it's because you put all those together, and it is because of that, because of all these things that you find yourself always at the periphery. And so all these things gave me knowing that I really am privileged in many ways. I had opportunities and I got educated, and that there are others who are not quite as privileged and not quite as educated, and the doors are not open for them and there are barriers in front of them. So it made me far more sensitive to women's stories and hearing it, and actually to become an ambassador for women, an ambassador for nurses. Education opens doors.
Yeah.
So that's where my interest in educating nurses, but I also want you to know that the research is showing that educated nurses tend to help patients, to provide quality care, decrease morbidity and decrease morbidity. So the research is showing something that we knew long ago,
Right.
that education is really important.
So we kind of need to pick this up a little bit. So you went from UCLA, they then hired you to stay on.
They recruited me actually to stay on, but but there is another thing I want to share, because it's actually ties together my background to my interest in nursing. When I was 11 years old, my best friend in Alexandria was the next villa's doorman's daughter, who was one of 6 kids in the family. And I was an only child until 9 years of age. So we went to different schools, but we'd spend so much time together. Every summer, her family would send her to Upper Egypt to the extended family. And I would be really heartbroken because I was very much alone. And my family explained to me how important values are.
Right.
And that's why she goes back, so that she maintains those values. Well, one summer, she went, and she was about 11, 12, and she never came back.
Yeah.
And at the time, it was devastating that I lost my best friend.
Right.
But later on, it became more devastating because I understood that she went because she got married at the age of 11 to her cousin. So I normalized that because it's just part of a culture. And the more later on I thought about it, I thought that girls are against their will. They get married very young, they get pregnant very young, and therefore they die very young too.
So just to do a chronology, you went from UCLA, then you came up to UC San Francisco, and you taught doctoral candidates, and then you got recruited to University of Pennsylvania to be the dean of the School of Nursing, and you committed to 5 years and were there, was it 16?
Yeah, as a dean, 12 and a half.
12 and a half.
Yes.
Yes.
But I was there 16
So
years.
in this whole projection, you went from a country where there was not a bachelor's degree in nursing to, I know, because I know you personally, to probably the preeminent expert on women's health internationally. I know that you have had interviews and have lobbied and have influenced presidents of countries, including our own, on both parties, and so on and so forth. And I really want the audience to understand that that your influence has impacted millions and millions of people worldwide. And a lot of your emphasis has been on the role of urbanization of women and their health, and transition of when people get into new situations and how they need to cope and be flexible. So just briefly, I'd like to know how this became an area of focus for you, and if you can give us one or two quick back of the envelope tips on how to cope with major transition.
So my life's work is not urbanization. My life's work is women's health and transitions. And there are three things that I'm really connecting together. Change affects people's health. So a simple change as having a first baby, it changes the lifestyle of a person. Being diagnosed with a chronic illness, being diagnosed with an acute illness, starting chemotherapy, all these changes are perhaps outside the person. But internally, there is a transition that they go through. So transition is more the lived experience of a person. Nurses facilitate transitions. Nurses are at the heart of transition. They prepare people for the change. They help them cope with the change. They help them cope with the aftermath. So nursing transitions are there. Now, women are also at the center of transitions. Women have the babies, women take care of their husbands, they take care of their parents, women take care of the community in transition. So their health also gets affected by transition, and they are the caregivers. Mm-hmm. So here is my interest in transition, which is I redefine nursing as facilitating transitions.
Interesting.
And women's health is affected by that. But one of the biggest transitions that we are facing in the world now is urbanization. Mm-hmm. Pretty soon, 70% of the world will be urbanized. Mm-hmm. And of course, early on, listening to my grandmother moving from a rural area to an urban area. So unfortunately, we don't develop urban areas and build cities from a women's point of view and from women's perspective. So that's one. Women roles, they need caregiving, they need to take their children to a daycare, they take care of elderly in the family, they need to do the shopping, and cities are not organized.
And have careers.
And have careers, of course. It's all these things. Yeah. But cities are not organized to facilitate all these movements for women. But also, and it's really important to remember, with immigration and with migration, the first who migrate and immigrate are usually women. They live at the periphery of the city, and they live in slums where there is not enough light, there aren't fresh fruits, there aren't fresh vegetables, it's unsafe for them, and again, there are no transportation for them, but yet they are the workers. They are the ones who earn living. So I started thinking, working with my colleagues who are architects and designers and real estate people, thinking about what happens in urbanization and what if we look at it from a gender perspective, from gender inequity perspective, and decided that we actually then developed a book that's on developing cities and women's health
in the world cities.
Yeah, with my colleagues who are eminent in design and architecture and real estate. And that was, and brought many people together from different parts of the world to think about that. So that was a turning point in terms of the urbanization and what United Nations is thinking about now in developing cities as we become even more urbanized and have to have health care in it.
Wow. That's quite a jump from Alexandria to world cities. You are amazing. So you have had mentors. I know that you are the world's best mentor and networker of anyone I have ever known. Will you please share with us what you've learned about mentoring?
Oh, yeah, thank you for this question, because I consider mentorship most important probably contribution that I have made. First of all, I want to differentiate. Mentors are different than advisors and sponsors. Mentors is a holistic thing, and it's a two-way street. And mentors learn a lot from mentees, just as mentees learn from mentors. A mentor looks at the whole person and their career and their life, and takes integrate all the roles together. So I credit my mentees, and I have many mentees all over the world. I credit my mentees for teaching me a lot and inspiring me about mentorship, and many of them continue to be in my life too. So one of the biggest pleasures for me now is when I get invited to go to the countries I go to, and I see that my mentees are leaders there and are really transforming healthcare, transforming nursing and transforming women's health.
So what are some characteristics of being a good mentor?
Listening is one, and it's the same characteristic about also researching women and learning about the needs of men. Listening to them, knowing that they have multiple responsibilities, and knowing that they have life experiences that I want to value, to bring in, that it's life experiences as they are as important as education. I'm also known to be a nagging mentor.
What does that mean?
That means that I have absolutely no problem picking up the phone at 6 o'clock in the morning and calling one of my mentees because she didn't bring a chapter on time, and say, where is that chapter? And finding out that she a chapter in a dissertation,
right,
and finding out that she really has not worked on it. So I would say, with all respect, due respect to her, that she needs to come and sit in an office in front of me for the next week and work on it right in front of my eye. So it's really showing caring, and showing caring about what's going on in a person's life. But another very important characteristic of mentor, the most important, is opening doors. Opening doors for the mentees. Matching the talents of the mentee and their capacity with new opportunities. And making sure that those new opportunities not only present themselves, but avail themselves to the mentees. Connecting people, not only opening doors, but collaboration, yes. Providing support system for the mentee is important.
So let's bring this locally back to Marin. What are your hopes for Marin? What priorities do you want to see addressed?
I love Marin County. I raised my children here, and my best friends are in Marin County. Two things I'd like to see in Marin. One is that we are a diverse county, but we are not as an inclusive county. And I would like to see us to have many dialogues about how we become more inclusive individually and as a community. The second thing that I'm hoping for Marin is that I am a trustee at the Buck Institute for Research for the Aging. And it is a premier institute, a cutting-edge research on aging, and we are aging in Marin. So I would like us to be also part of that dialogue, to be talk about what are the best models for inclusiveness of the aged people here, and the different models of actually making them grow old healthy. But acknowledge and celebrate that we have the best institute for aging in the world right here in our own backyard, and it's at the cutting edge of the best research to make us age in a healthy way.
Thank you, Afaf Meleis, for sharing your stories and your insights.